What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Consuming Crime with Jen and Jules. It is Jules here. I literally just recorded this and the video was on, but the audio was not recording. And what's the most important part of a podcast? The audio. So I will be reading this case again. Welcome to the Patreon. I know this is a Patreon exclusive episode. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Since this is a Patreon exclusive episode, let's just get into the episode. For me, I'm doing it again. At this point, I should be able to just do it on memory, but who knows? I mean, on the bright side, I'm glad I'm doing it again a little bit because I read the case hearing of the confession tape, and I will tell you there are some differences. So I'm gonna get into the documentary notes first, and then I'm gonna go to the case hearing, the official case hearing, and we're gonna go over some of the things that the documentary just conveniently left out. The episode starts off on Monday, September 4th in the year 2000, and there's video footage of, it's like the police footage, and it's around train tracks. There's like some puddles of blood, and there's 2 dead bodies. This was around 12:37 in the afternoon. This area was located off of Bladen Road in Brantley County, Georgia. Officers are reporting a double homicide. One victim was a white male in his 40s named Robert Van Allen, and the other victim was an older man in his 50s or 60s. His name was Lavelle Lynn. This county was known to be really poor. There were lots of hardworking people, and they were all pretty much just struggling to make ends meet. This was also a county where Lavelle Lynn made all of his money. The documentary is now interviewing a woman by the name of Belinda Lynn. This was Lavelle's daughter. She starts showing us pictures of her and her father. She calls him the peacemaker of the family. She tells us that there were lots of people that liked him, and there were lots of people that did not like him, which makes sense. That's just about everybody. He owned a wreckage car business, so he went and picked up people's cars for a living. He bought car parts, he sold car parts. There's no indication that he had a lot of employees, so I'm assuming a lot of his customer base dealt with him directly. On the morning of the murders, their house received a phone call and Belinda had answered it. It was from a convenience store nearby. Belinda handed the phone over to Lavelle as they had asked for him, and Lavelle was asking where they were at. She overheard him saying that they wanted their car to get picked up by Braden Road. According to her, he didn't normally take his truck out in the dirt like that, but he went anyway. My question here is, if it was a family member that did this to him, wouldn't he have maybe mentioned to them, oh, I'm gonna go pick up so-and-so off the road? It's just a question that I have. He was always known to be carrying cash, as he did not believe in banks. All he had on him was the money for the light bill and the money for the phone bill, which equated to about $500. Robert, the other victim on the scene, was Lavelle's best friend and mechanic. He still had his jewelry, he still was wearing his watch, and the money was in his wallet still. So this was clearly just something for Lavelle, and Robert most likely just got killed because he was there. They had been shot with a .25 handgun. The documentary now has us at the Telfair State Prison in Helena, Georgia. There's a video recording of a man named Buddy Woodall, Lavelle's nephew, and by video recording I mean it looks like they're FaceTiming. He's saying that at the time he was working 2 jobs, and he does admit he was having financial troubles. The documentary asks Belinda what she thinks happened and if she thinks that Buddy had anything to do with it. She tells them no, especially because they were all so close, he could have just asked Lavelle for money and he would have given it to him, especially something like $500. The documentary is now interviewing a man named David Stallings. He is a Brantley County undersheriff or sheriff's deputy. He says he interviewed the family and each of them pointed in a whole different direction. They were like, that guy did it, she did it, he did it, she did it, and even one of them pointed the finger at the sheriff saying he did it. So all over the place, and overall sheriffs had over 35 suspects to look at that could match the double homicide. Some believed it to be retaliation for Lavelle being involved in drug dealing, and the type of drug I wasn't clear. It was either heroin or meth, but definitely a hard drug. A witness came forward and identified one of them as a white male, which according to sheriffs does not help because the entire county pretty much consists of white males. But they did have a sketch, and the sketch looked a lot like Lavelle's friend Jojo Horton. So they took him in, they questioned him for, according to him, 72 hours, which is wild. I'm curious as to how that works, if you get to sleep, if they feed you. I mean, I feel like they have to feed you, but overall, they didn't get anything from the interview, and it just kind of went dead. According to Woody's wife, Woody was very upset when he found out his uncle was shot and killed, which I mean, that doesn't really clear him of doing it, but it's worth noting, I guess. There was a 6-month investigation after this, and according to sheriffs, there were no leads, and at some point, they were led to Buddy. How they got there, I'm not sure. They checked Page's Mini Mart, which was the name of the convenience store that the phone call was placed from the morning of the murders. And around the time the phone call was placed to Lavelle's house, Buddy was in the footage. According to him, he went to AutoZone to get a starter for his Jeep, and then he had to go to the bathroom. So he went to the convenience store, went to the bathroom, left, came back in for some cigarettes, saw that the line was too long, and then left again. He says that 6 minutes after he left the store is when the phone call was placed. Belinda is also saying that the man on the phone did not sound like Buddy. Buddy is like a rustier voice, he's a lot lower, and the man on the phone was a lot softer. The prosecution is saying that Buddy left at 9:50 in the footage and he could have gone to the payphone outside. I remember the phone call was placed at 9:50, but there's on-screen text on the documentary saying that the exact time of the call was never determined. After reading the case summary though, I don't know how much I'm going to believe this documentary. Officers had collected shell casings, and the shell casings matched that of a semi-automatic handgun and compared to casings found outside of Buddy's parents' house, which was also a semi-automatic handgun, aka the .25 caliber handgun. The documentary says that it was a match, but it wasn't definitively proven that it came from the same gun. I don't understand that, but I also don't understand guns. Maybe you guys do. Buddy and his brother-in-law were being suspected for circumstantial and hearsay. Circumstantial has weight. Hearsay, witness testimony is not super reliable, just so you guys. It might be one of the worst pieces of evidence brought into a courtroom. The tire track markings were also consistent with the tires on Buddy's car, which you guys, and I guess like my biggest question here is, in this county, how common is a .25 caliber gun? In this county, how common are these tires purchased at a local tire store? Because if these are unique to Buddy, then sure, circumstantially it looks like he did it. But if people are constantly carrying around .25 calibers and they all drive around cars with these type of tires, why are we looking at just him? Documentary doesn't mention any other suspects, so we're just gonna go based on this, I guess. Buddy also did not look like the sketch that I mentioned earlier, by the way. His attorney is saying that detectives were focused on him and not any other suspects, which I just said, but also what about those 6 months that they were looking? We don't know what they found in those 6 months, so we can't attest to it. After being questioned the first time, Buddy went to see his pastor/teacher, H.E. Wheatley. According to him, he confided in him and he said that he was scared. He said that he didn't do it, but he felt like police thought that he did it. So he advised him, he was like, well then just don't tell them anything anymore. He went home to his wife and officers picked him up again later on that night. And according to his wife, at that point he was super tired, he had just drank some alcohol, and he also took some Xanax. So he was obviously not in like the perfect state of mind to be interviewed, but it is what it is, and that's what happened. According to Buddy's defense attorney, officers were interviewing him for 9 to 10 hours before turning on the video footage. If that's true, that's definitely not okay. Obviously, if you have nothing to hide, just record. Who cares? They were asking him if anybody had used his wife's car that day. He said yes, Davey was going to use the car, Davey being his brother-in-law. According to Buddy today, the cops told him that if you say Davey did it, we will let you go. However, that exact sentence and that part, we don't see in the tapes. They used a computer voice stress analyzer test on him, which is pretty much just as reliable, if not less reliable, than a polygraph test. This is also not admissible in court. It's also not considered reliable, and it's used pretty much just as an investigative tool. If it's not reliable, why are we using it? They asked him 2 main questions. They said, were you there? And then they said, did you shoot and kill anybody? On the question of did you shoot and kill anybody, the test indicated that he was being truthful. And on the question of were you there, the test indicated he was being deceitful. 10 hours into the tapes, and Woody is in tears. He is now saying he did see Davey, and he asked if he could do something with him. They get into Christie's car, drive down to Bladen's Road. Davey takes him to the end of it, gives him a gun, says shoot in the air twice if you hear anybody coming nearby. And then he leaves him. Woody accounts that he remembers seeing people fishing, and he even remembers seeing a snake and shooting at it once, which is very specific because in previous confession tapes, we see that the officers kind of feed them information, but it doesn't look like this part was fed to him. It just looks like he came up with it on his own. So I don't know, I believe it. In the interview now, Woody is saying he was lying and he really just wanted to go home. The officers start telling him in the tapes, they were saying that, you notice we didn't take your fingerprints. The reason we did not take your fingerprints is because we already have partial fingerprints from the shell casings, and we already know it matches yours. Which is like, that doesn't make any sense. If you haven't taken my fingerprints, how would you know if it matched or not? Unless he had been previously convicted of a crime, which then of course they would have his fingerprints in the database. They're also taking a much softer approach than we have previously seen in confession tapes. I know that normally they're really aggressive, and these officers seem to be more like suggestive, and they're even leaning into him in the interview tape. They start kind of basically saying, you know, earlier you told us that you weren't there at all, and then your mind opened up, and then you were nearby. So maybe you were there and your brain is just blocking it. Maybe that snake wasn't a snake. Maybe it was Davy. Woody says, I did not shoot my uncle or Robert. The officer says, I know, but I know that you just sat there and I know that you watched. So open up your mind. It's kind of like hypnotic a little bit, I noticed, which I'm not sure is misconduct. It doesn't seem like they're doing it. Like, they're being suggestive, sure, but it's not nearly as aggressive as we've seen before. Then Buddy says, I remember Robert being in front of the car. I heard a gunshot from the back of the car. So now he is saying that he was there. Then he asks, do I get to go home now? And the officer tells him, I don't see why not. And they let him go, I guess. Buddy is now saying that he really just wanted out and he thought that this was the only way out. And he admits he took the coward's way out and he regrets it. Obviously, he regrets it. He's in prison right now. I don't know, again, it's like, why are you gonna say you did something if you didn't do it? Like, that's only gonna get you in more trouble. Like, I mean, but again, if the attorney was correct and they didn't start recording until 9 to 10 hours after, then we don't know what they said to him. We don't know if they really made it seem like he couldn't leave. Which, guys, please remember that no matter what state you're in, we still have our Constitution. I mean, if you're in the United States. And the Fifth Amendment, the right against self-incrimination, you don't have to talk to them, which is, you have the right to remain silent in your Miranda rights, and also due process. They can't hold you if they don't have anything. Buddy was in prison for 5 years before the trial started, and during these 5 years, the defense attorneys planned to have confession tape experts to testify, which I'm actually curious. I would love to interview somebody who's an expert in confession tapes, or false confessions, because I want to know how that works. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, we've seen it. It's a thing. It exists. But I do want to know, what causes somebody to falsely confess to a crime they did not commit? A few months before the trial, the state of Georgia ruled that experts in false confessions are not admitted in trials. So, really bad luck here. But they weren't allowed, and so Buddy ended up getting 3 life terms with the possibility of parole. 6 months after Buddy's trial, David Wimberly, who is this Davy guy that allegedly shot and killed these two, he gets out of jail, and all charges were dropped because without that confession, they didn't have enough. Like, who told them to throw out the confession, and why didn't that same person go to Buddy's trial and say, throw out the confession here too, and then they both be free? I don't get that. Due to insufficient evidence, David's case was never tried. But that's the part I don't get. That was the part I was telling you guys about earlier in the episode, is why the hell is David free and Buddy's not? That's the end of the documentary, but I want to get into this appeal. On January 27th in 2014, Buddy Woodall filed an appeal with the state of Georgia. It was decided on January 27th, 2014, and the judges affirmed the decision, which means he is still in prison, yes. But they mentioned a lot of stuff that the documentary did not mention. Well, the first thing is, the way that the bodies were found, there was a hunter walking around in that area, and he had heard 3 to 4 gunshots before walking to where he heard the gunshots. He found the bodies and called police. See, here it says, a forensic witness testified that the tire tracks located at the scene matched 3 of the 4 tires on appellant's light blue Pontiac 6000, appellant being Buddy Woodall. The basis for the appeal was that a juror was selected improperly. They're saying that Cynthia L. Battle, an African-American woman born in 1954, served on Buddy's jury, and when she received her jury summons, it contained her correct address and the name Cynthia R. Battle. I guess they're saying she was illegally seated, and so this is why they wanted an appeal. The jury on this case also found that the confession appeared to be voluntary, and like I said, they ended up keeping him in prison. So I don't really see this as a false confession. I mean, we didn't see any of the aggressive tactics we've seen before, and I mean, maybe he was tired when he confessed, but being tired, coming off of Xanax, coming off of alcohol, is really not an excuse to falsely confess to a murder you did not commit. David should still be in prison. I will say that. It's not fair that one of them is there and one of them is not. But at the end of the day, like, I don't think Buddy was lying. I think he's lying now. Who knows? Let me know what you guys think. That's pretty much it for today. Again, thank you for subscribing and becoming a part of the Patreon. I really appreciate it. Thanks for consuming crime with me today, and you'll hear me next week on the regular feed.